This is Dave, the Guru,
and lesson 2 of our tables tutorial series. We're going to begin to work with some tables and just begin to show you how you can incorporate them into rules and into your logic. So let's go ahead, and I just want to take a quick peek at this table. And we'll go ahead and change all these. Let's go ahead and change all these to integer values, just so I have some space to work with. And we'll go ahead and go back. And let's go ahead into our prototype actor, and let's get rid of all this stuff here. So let's go ahead and let's make a rule. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to actually, well, let's do this first. Let's go ahead and just do some basic stuff with attributes and changing a table value. So let's say that a specific attribute, and we'll go ahead, and I think I made one here. We'll make one and we'll just call it change, just to give it a name. And we'll go back in and we'll say when attribute game.change equals 1, and we'll just come down. I'll go over to this custom section, makes it quicker. And we'll change the table value. So we'll go ahead to our table. And we'll go ahead and change row 1, column 1. And we'll go ahead and change it to the value of this attribute. So we'll come in and we can come over and we can select that attribute and actually make it our value that we're going to change to. So when we're writing to a table, we can actually look at a value at the game level and change it to that as well. We just have to make sure that the attribute we're referencing matches in its type what we're writing to in the table. So just for convenience sake, let's go ahead and I'm just going to change this to 1 right in here as default. And we'll come back and let's go ahead and grab a display text. And I'm actually going to put that over in this here. And we'll go ahead and display our table cell value like we did. We have to grab the table cell value function, table, game, table, row 1, column 1. And so when we go in here, we'll see that it's 1. So we've changed the value. So now let's say that we want to look at the value of a table and then make a change and compare it to something. So let's go ahead and we'll go ahead in, and now what we need to do is we need to change this to a numeric expression. So we're going to go ahead, now this gives us the expression editor, and we'll go ahead and grab our table cell value, table, and let's go with row 2, column 1. And then what we'll do is we'll go back into our table, just for convenience sake, for time purposes, and we'll change this to 1. And we'll come back. And we're still going to change this value in here. We're still going to write to the other row and column and look at it. So let's go ahead and preview it, and we can see we change it to 1. Now if I go back in the table and I switch this to 0, back to 0, you're going to see we're at 0. So that's how you can look into a table value and go in there. You can look into a table value itself, measure that value, and then put a value in here, and then execute certain code, whether it be writing to or changing a table value, or whether it be move tos or whatever you're doing in here. So now let's go ahead and do something else. I'm going to show you another little cool little trick that we can do inside assigning the table and row, or the row and columns in here. So let's go ahead and we'll just let's get rid of this, and we'll come over here and we'll make a self attribute. And we'll go ahead, let's just call this row number. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and let's just match the display text to that row number. So we're going to go ahead with row, and we're going to come in and get rid of that spot. I'm going to come down and we're going to go self row number. So now we're actually looking to this self attribute, and you can do the same thing with game level attributes, any attribute for that matter. And you can come in and put this in place of where you would actually type in a row number, and it'll actually give you the row number of whatever value is in this attribute, because that's all we're really doing is just putting one number in another place. It's not magic. These are all numbers, and we can address those numbers in different ways. So then let's just go ahead, and I'm going to change this rule out. Let's get rid of this one. And I'm going to use when touch is pressed. And then I'm just going to grab a change attribute. And what I'm going to do is every time I press, I'm going to just change that self row number. So we're going to change self row number to self row number, +1. So what this is going to do is it's going to keep upping this number, which is going to change the row that's displayed in column 1. So let's go into our table, and we'll just put some values in there. Let's just go ahead and do a number sequence. Okay, so we've got a number sequence here. And now we can just go in and we can look at this. Now, one of the things that you need to be aware of when we're doing this kind of work with tables, you have to make sure that you're not addressing in your code somewhere a 0 count, because there is no such thing as row 0. It starts at row 1 or column 1, and there is no such thing as row 0 or column 0. This will cause crashes and monkey up your code. It wreaks havoc on the system because it's looking for something that doesn't exist. So there's two ways we could get around that. We could just tell it to start at row 1, which is an easy way to do it. But let's say you're waiting for information to come into an attribute. As the game progresses, it fills in some numbers, and there's really no way to start it off. You don't want to start it off with a number. Another way we can do it is we could go ahead and make a rule, and in the rule we could go and address that attribute, and we can say when that attribute is greater than 0, then do this. And what essentially happens is when the code comes down to scan, it looks at this condition, says this condition is not valid, and jumps right over this piece of code where we would be possibly addressing this 0 row number. So this is how you get around having the potential of having a 0 row or a 0 column and asking the code to look for something that doesn't exist. This will cause crashes in your game and cause problems in your game if you're addressing a row or column 0. So let's go ahead, just for ease sake, I'm going to go ahead and just skip that. I did want to show you that because that's important. And we'll go ahead and we'll preview it, and you can see that we're at number 1, which is in our table. So when I click it, we're going to go to number 2, number 3, number 4, 5, and etc. all the way to nothing because we don't have any more tables and rows in there. And you can do the same thing in this expression for a column as well. You could put a column in there, and you can use that expression in anything. So you could come up here and you could say you wanted to change an attribute to something. So let's say we want to change game dot change to a table cell value. So let's go ahead and do the table cell value, and we'll grab the table. In the row, we're going to make the self row number. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to go column 1, just like we did below. So let's grab another display text here. And let's go ahead and display that attribute as well. And we could just go ahead and give it an offset down. Let's say -40. And we'll go ahead and just give it another color so we can identify it. And so now we can look at these two values, and what we'll see this changing. Now in here we should have this first, because this is what we're scrolling through the tables and kind of keep everything in sync. So, and we'll just go ahead, let's go ahead and look at that. And so you can see we've got 2 1s, 2, 3, 4, etc. So this is the way that you can start to see how you can use tables, and some tricks in how you can take an expression like this and actually take a table value and then move it into another value, and you can use other attributes to manipulate where you're pulling your information from in a table and moving stuff around. So you could see how valuable this is, because let's say that I was looking at a score. Say we're saving a score, right? And so instead of having to load and do all that kind of stuff, once I've written the score to the table, no matter what the scene is, I can simply go to my numeric expression, or I could actually go to, I want a piece of information, I want to measure the score against something. I could go, numeric expression, table cell value, table, row 1, or using my self attribute, column 1. Let's say that's where I'm saving my score. And if it's, let's say it's greater than or less than, say a game score. So we'll just grab that game dot change attribute. Let's say that was our score. So now we could say, okay, we're looking at that value and we want to save the high score. So this would be our score, and this is our high score. So if we say this is less than, then we'll come down, and we'll grab the change table value, and we would go ahead and put that in there, and then we would grab our table, and then we would go ahead and say, our row, let's say that's where we're saving our high scores, row 1, column 1, and then we would make the value the new score. And then we would, of course, come in and say, save our table. And so now, if in another actor we want to look at what our score is and we're using a display text, now we don't have to go in and modify these values. They can just stay as they are, because they're going to be continually looking to that value. So now wherever we're matching the score, let's say in our last scene, and then when we go back to the scoreboard, we would usually have to load stuff and do all that. Now we don't have to do any of that, because once it's done, up here, it's in that value, and since our table stuff doesn't change, and even if it did, we could do it by looking at outside attributes. You don't have to go back and rework things around. It's kind of working with tables really makes your code real generic. So it allows you to build much more integrated code, because now you can just build these generic functions and just have them looking at certain pieces of information. And now from anywhere, you can modify that information, and everything in your code automatically gets updated, because it's all generic. It's all just looking at that spot, not at a particular load and save and all those kinds of things. And this is where tables really begins to help you build integrated code, because then it becomes easy across your code. If you're looking at a table value and you have this spread across all your stuff, and then you want to go in and just say, I want to make that value different, well, you just come into the table, change your value, and bang, all your code across your whole game that looks at that reference number in the table is totally updated. And you can do this across all your stuff. And so this makes it so much easier, much more efficient, much more generalized type of code. And this becomes really important when you're interested in multiplayer, because multiplayer is all tables based. So really learning all these tricks and different tips and how to get the most out of tables and manipulating tables and all that kind of stuff really becomes invaluable to the process. So this is our lesson 2 on tables. And in the next lesson, we'll go ahead and look at working with text expressions now that we've kind of worked with numbers here. And I'll show you how to use tables in the expression editor to kind of match and begin to look at text-based information. Because basically with numbers and with Booleans, they're pretty much the same in the sense of how we're looking at them, but it gets a little more intricate when we're dealing with text. So we'll look at that next time.
You can find me on the forums under the name Lost Oasis Games. This is Dave, the Guru. I'll see you in the next video.